Welcome to part 2 of Awareness Isn't Healing: The Adult Consequences of Always Monitoring. One of the most difficult things about hypervigilance is that many people don't recognize the cost until much later. Because the adaptation often works, it helps you notice things. It helps you anticipate problems. It helps you avoid surprises. It helps you stay prepared. And because it can appear functional, productive, and responsible, people rarely question it until exhaustion arrives. Because no nervous system was designed to stay alert all the time. No nervous system was designed to monitor every atmosphere, every mood, every interaction, every possibility. Eventually there is a cost, and often that cost appears in ways people don't immediately connect to hypervigilance. For some people, it shows up as chronic exhaustion, not physical tiredness alone, a deeper kind of fatigue. The fatigue of carrying awareness constantly, the fatigue of being mentally present for everything, the fatigue of never fully putting the weight down. You wake up tired, you go to sleep tired, not because you haven't rested, because your nervous system never fully stopped working. For others, it appears inside relationships. You find yourself analyzing conversations, replaying interactions, looking for signs, looking for changes, looking for evidence that everything is okay, or evidence that something isn't. You notice delays, you notice tone, you notice distance, you notice subtle shifts. And because you've spent years learning that changes matter, your mind automatically starts searching for explanations. Did I do something wrong? Are they upset? Have they changed their mind? Are they pulling away? Again, this isn't weakness. This is a nervous system doing exactly what it learned to do. Looking for information, looking for certainty, looking for safety. The challenge is that relationships become very difficult to enjoy when your attention is constantly searching for threats. Because connection requires presence, and hypervigilance pulls attention into anticipation. One foot remains in the future, preparing, predicting, monitoring, waiting. Some people experience this through rest, or more accurately, the inability to rest. They sit down to relax. Yet something inside remains active. The body is still listening, still noticing, still preparing, even if the conscious mind wants to stop. This is why many hypervigilant people struggle with stillness, not because they dislike rest, because rest removes distraction. And when distraction disappears, awareness becomes louder. The monitoring becomes easier to hear. The nervous system becomes easier to feel. The anticipation becomes harder to ignore, which is why some people stay busy. Not because they love productivity, because movement feels easier than stillness. Doing feels safer than stopping. And eventually, an identity forms around this too. The capable one, the productive one, the reliable one, the strong one. Yet beneath all of it is often the same pattern: a nervous system that never learned how to fully disengage from responsibility. The confusion around identity. Perhaps the deepest consequence of hypervigilance isn't anxiety. Perhaps it isn't exhaustion. Perhaps it isn't burnout. Perhaps it's confusion. Because when adaptation becomes automatic, identity becomes difficult to access. You know what everyone else feels, but do you know what you feel? You know what everyone else needs, but do you know what you need? You know what everyone else wants, but do you know what you want? Many women arrive at adulthood carrying incredible awareness of others, while having very little connection to themselves. Not because they are incapable, because their attention was trained elsewhere. The nervous system spent years looking outward, years monitoring environments, years tracking emotions, years predicting reactions, and very little time asking, what do I think? What do I want? What feels right for me? This is why identity reconstruction often begins with confusion. People expect certainty. Instead, they find questions. Because for the first time, attention starts moving inward. And when attention moves inward, there is often a surprising amount to rediscover. Part 2. There is a difference between who you are and what you learn to do. One of the most important realizations a person can have is this: an adaptation is not the same thing as an identity. The fact that you learn to monitor does not mean monitoring is who you are. The fact that you learned to anticipate does not mean anticipation is who you are. The fact that you became responsible does not mean responsibility is your identity. These behaviors may have helped you survive. They may have helped you navigate difficult environments. They may have protected you, but protection and identity are not the same thing. And many people spend years believing they are the adaptation, believing they are the hypervigilance, believing they are the anxiety, believing they are the overthinking, believing they are the responsibility. When in reality, those things may simply be strategies. Strategies that became familiar, strategies that became automatic, strategies that became mistaken for self. The goal is not to criticize those strategies. The goal is not to shame them. The goal is not to remove them overnight. The goal is understanding. Because understanding creates separation. And separation creates choice. When you can recognize a pattern as a pattern, it stops feeling like identity. It becomes something you can observe, something you can understand, something you can work with, instead of something you simply are. And that distinction changes everything. Because identity reconstruction does not begin by becoming someone new. It begins by recognizing what was never truly you in the first place. Not because those adaptations were wrong, but because they were responses. And responses are different from selfhood. The nervous system learned to survive. That doesn't mean survival is your identity. You learned vigilance. That doesn't mean vigilance is your personality. You learned awareness. That doesn't mean awareness is all you are. There is more underneath the adaptation, more underneath the monitoring, more underneath the anticipation. And for many people, identity reconstruction begins the moment they realize that. Not when they change, not when they heal, not when they fix themselves. When they finally separate themselves from what they learned to do. If any part of this conversation felt familiar, you're not alone. Many of the things people describe as personality are actually adaptations, patterns learned through repetition, responses shaped by experience, ways of navigating environments that once required vigilance. This channel explores those patterns, not to label people, not to pathologize them, but to understand them, because what feels normal isn't always who you are. Sometimes it's who you had to become, and understanding that difference is where identity reconstruction begins. If you're interested in exploring emotional conditioning, survival roles, identity reconstruction, and becoming more self-led, you'll find more conversations like this throughout the channel. Until next time, thank you for listening.